So tell me about yourself.
All right, well, in terms of my profession, I am a personal injury lawyer, and I started a law firm with my partners 22 years ago.
And what is your role at the firm?
I'm one of the founding members. I'm a senior partner at the firm.
And then what kind of clients do you normally represent?
So we have all kinds of personal injury clients. So under the umbrella of personal injury, there's medical malpractice clients that we have, clients who are victims of trucking accidents, construction site accidents, injuries from products, anything that you can think of that involves injury to the person, we handle those cases.
And then as an injury lawyer, do you represent many people who are involved in distracted driving incidents? And what are some trends that you see, if any?
Yeah, all the time. A very large part of our practice is automobile collisions, whether they be passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles, even subway crashes, bus crashes. And the distracted driving that's so prevalent in our community right now is leading to more and more incidences where people are getting injured and even killed. So we see that all the time.
I was just gonna ask, like, what are some consequences that you commonly see? You just listed, like, obviously death, but do you see, like, many other consequences as well?
Yeah, so there's a whole wide array of consequences that happen from distracted driving. In terms of the injuries themselves, it could be where someone's distracted and then they run a red light and they get lucky that they don't injure somebody, or maybe the other car swerves out of the way or whatever, the pedestrian can avoid the collision, all the way up until death. There's a wide range of physical injury. The consequences, though, don't end there. So you have the victim of oftentimes a fatality or a serious injury, and the family of that victim who suffers and grieves with that person and oftentimes has to care for that person for the rest of their lives. But you also have the flip side of that. You have the defendant. These are often good people who do dumb things. When we drive distracted, we're being selfish. We make these big mistakes that can lead to big consequences. In the lives of the defendants, the people that I sue who caused these injuries, those lives are devastated as well. And that's just the civil side that I handle. Of course, there's a criminal component. If you kill somebody because you're distracted on the road, you're going to be liable potentially for involuntary manslaughter. You could spend a large portion of your life behind bars. There's lots of fees attendant to criminal defense, and that's going to be on your record. Also, whether you kill somebody or not, if you injure somebody, it's going to be a reckless driving offense or something of that nature. So between the criminal and the civil component of it, the consequences are absolutely devastating.
Right. Do you see high rates of young adults who participate in distracted driving, or do you see more of a variety of ages?
Well, we see it all across the spectrum of the driving age, from people who begin with their learner's permit and they're out with parents in their vehicles, all the way through older people. Now, the truth of the matter is that younger people are more connected to devices. And that's because younger people grew up with the devices and older people, didn't. Now, there are some people, in the 40-plus age who indeed are highly connected to their devices and they drive distracted all the time. But the sweet spot for, if you're looking at the greatest percentage of distracted drivers, is in the new driver. So the teens up until the early 20s.
Okay.
Which is particularly dangerous because those folks have the least experience on the road.
Right.
So they're coming in with the least experience, and now they're distracted from driving, and it just augments the chance dramatically for a crash.
Right. Do you see cases of people who are involved in accidents because they're either like using their phones while crossing the street? Was that like a big distraction, like pedestrians being hit as well?
Sure. So I call that distracted walking.
Okay.
That's a big problem, and it's a twofold problem because you have someone who's crossing in a roadway, or even in a parking lot of a school or a grocery store or anything, and people are on their phones and they're distracted, which is bad because they could be going outside of a crosswalk or crossing when they're not supposed to be crossing, or moving behind a car that's backing up. But the other part of the problem for the distracted driver is, even if they're doing what they think is the right thing, meaning walking in a crosswalk with a walk sign, the problem is there may be a distracted driver or an otherwise reckless driver who's going to run right through a red light and go right through that crosswalk. And you better be ready for those people, because that kind of stuff happens all the time in every community. particularly in busy communities like the one in which we live.
Right. So, what are some campaigns that you've seen that are effective?
So I love the enddistracteddriving.org campaign. It's a fantastic national organization. It was created by a lawyer and his wife for a very sad reason. Their child died. A beautiful young daughter that they had passed away because of a distracted driver. I give them all the credit in the world for starting this program. It's spread, as I said, nationwide, and they get into schools and before other organizations and businesses, and as I say, any type of organization, to spread the word about avoiding distracted driving and to teach people about the terrible consequences of distracted driving. Oprah had some program, Oprah Winfrey, many years ago. I don't know if she's still doing it. That caught national attention, which is a great thing. Insurance companies are starting programs. Schools are starting programs. It's all, people are getting it. They realize this, the statistics are so clear. They realize the importance of educating young drivers in particular, because once a habit is built, it's hard to break the habit. And we don't want people to get into a habit of driving in a distracted way.
So what campaigns or specific tactics do you think that are the most effective? Do you think that threat-based campaigns are more effective, just in general?
Well, so I think it's really important for all drivers to understand, and particularly again when you're young, because you want to learn from the beginning, that there are real consequences. And the term threatening, I'm not sure I call it a threatening campaign. I call it a comprehensive educational campaign. And so young people, and sometimes offenders who are older, they need to get re-educated. I think visual stuff is important. You need to show people incidents that happen in the communities, and then tell stories about individual people. I do that as part of my program. I've been doing it for many years. And I name people by name. I show video. And I think that kind of stuff really resonates and becomes provides more of a lasting impression on the viewer. Statistics are important because you can put it all into context, but just giving rote academic information can be quite boring, especially for young people. Sometimes they don't have quite the attention span. So adding to the statistics with visual stimuli of true events, and giving especially the real true stories of what happens to people is very important.
Right. I know you have in the past spoken to local schools about distracted driving. Do you still do this, and how often?
Yeah, I do. And it sort of comes in waves, and because I don't like to go to the same school too often. Right. So for instance, I'll go typically to a high school. I like to go in the Montgomery County area because that's where I live and that's where my children live. And I start in my community and I kind of branch out. But I've given presentations in Virginia, District of Columbia, and even throughout the country. But most of the presentations I give are local, and they are to the entire student body. I like to get into a high school and where they go into the auditorium, and I usually give 2 presentations a day. So they might have the freshman and sophomore classes in one presentation and the juniors and seniors in the next. And I also speak to parent-teacher associations because parents are part of the main, I don't want to say main, but they're a large part of the problem, especially when they have a new driver. Well, you never want to be a distracted driver, but you absolutely need to be clear to your child that they can't engage in that behavior. But it's one thing to say it. If on the other hand you're acting distracted in front of them, that's what they're going to remember. That you as a parent, you're not really living up to your words, and that matters.
Absolutely. So do you have any tips for getting students to get on board about being against distracted driving?
Yeah, the greatest tip I think I can give is for students who care about this issue, and hopefully it's a large percentage, to motivate others. It's always best for peers to influence each other. And then of course parents need to do it, and guardians and teachers and coaches, and we all need to be good examples for the people that we're around. But the biggest incentive I can give to people who care about this issue is to speak up about it, tell the stories about those that you know and love and care about, or maybe even read about that impacted you. Share those stories with other people. And don't tolerate, this is critical, don't tolerate distracted driving from other people. If a so-called friend or even a parent who carpools is acting in a distracted way, stop the person from doing it. And if they're not willing to stop doing it, don't drive with them anymore. Because all it takes is one moment and life changes forever. That's the problem.
That's kind of going off onto my next question is what are some ways that parents and schools can encourage students to practice safe driving?
Well, I'm really encouraged when I see schools invite me to come back and have other presenters speak about these issues. That shows a commitment from the administration and the willingness of the students to hear the message. So the more that people can do, the better. I think that these programs that students go into that are required before they get their permit and before they get their license incorporate a lot of the visual stuff that I'm talking about, and they tell the stories, whether it be from police officers or others involved in the instruction. I think all of that is good, and it's getting better. But at the end of the day, I think it can't just be a one-off. You can't say, I'm gonna have somebody come in 1 year, 1 month, give a presentation and check the box and say we're done as an administration. Repetition is important. It gives the gravity to the issue that it deserves.
Just a follow-up question that I thought of. Do you see more cases of like texting and driving or drinking and driving?
Well, you have to look at the statistics, but I will tell you this. Texting and driving is clearly more prevalent in our society.
Right.
Okay, because more people are doing that. I think even younger people now get what we've been taught for years now and decades now, that drinking and driving is bad. And it took the law, by the way, some time to come around on this. By that I mean when people used to drink under the influence, or drive rather under the influence, in some areas of the country there'd be a slap on the wrist the first time, or even maybe the second time. There's little tolerance now for drinking and driving.
Right.
And what's great now is we're seeing less and less tolerance for distracted driving. And it takes, unfortunately, people to get hurt and die for the law to get as tough as it needs to be.
Right.
From my perspective, one strike and you ought to be severely sanctioned in terms of your driving privileges. And that's where the legislatures are going throughout the country, which is good. So yes, it's more prevalent, distracted driving over drinking and driving. The other thing is that distracted driving causes you to be 3 times more likely to be involved in a crash than drunk driving. Now, you may say, well, what if you're completely inebriated? I get that. Like if you're stumbling, you can't open your eyes, and you're mumbling, and you can't put a sentence together, and you get behind the wheel, you're going to be more dangerous than a person who's completely sober and doing a quick text. However, drinking to the point where you are now legally intoxicated and qualify for DWI at the lower levels, you're clearly not capable of driving safely, but you're 3 times safer than if you are a sober texting driver.
Wow.
So flipping it around, it's 3 times more dangerous to be a texting driver than most drunk drivers. And the problem is, young people in particular, they're not willing to accept that. They think that they're coordinated enough, experienced enough, and different enough to get away with it. And that's why we see too many incidents on the road where people are getting hurt.
Do you see any intersect where people are both drinking and texting and driving at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of a case off the top of my head recently where someone did both. Oftentimes you have a drunk driver, they're not really capable of texting, and clearly they're not capable of driving well, and that's why they become a defendant in the cases that I handle. But there's just sort of using common sense. If you're selfish enough to drink and drive, you're clearly selfish enough to drink and text and drive. The great thing about technology now is that if someone causes injury to one of my clients, I'm going to get the defendant's text records.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get their call logs. I'm going to figure out why this happened. I'm not just going to look at the police report and see what the speed was and where it all happened. I'm going to get the black box out of the car. I'm going to get all the things that I already mentioned. We're going to peel back this sort of evidence, this onion evidence, and get to the bottom of exactly what happened. And if I find out that a selfish person decided to drink and get behind the wheel or text at the time that they were behind the wheel and cause my client to die or become paralyzed, you could darn bet that I'm going to do everything I can under the law to make sure that my client is made whole under the law and that there's appropriate punishment for the person who caused this life-altering event to happen.
Do you also see like any other ways of distracted driving, like such as like eating maybe?
Oh yeah, there's all kinds of
I feel like
distracted
that could
driving,
be,
putting on makeup,
Mm.
eating, and people, you can imagine whatever
Yeah.
you're holding in your hand, you kind of grab something because you're late to go to a meeting and you're driving with your leg or one hand while you're trying to eat, or
Yeah.
you're eating and you're drinking something and you drop something while you're eating or drinking, and then you're worried that maybe you stained your shirt, so you look down. The problem is things can happen in a flash. And if you're going 55 miles an hour, you're going over 80 feet per second.
Mm-hmm.
And so whether it's a deer jumping out in front of you or someone changing a lane or an ambulance coming at an intersection and you're not focused on the sound, whatever it might be, we need to be completely attentive all the time when we're driving. It's one of the rare things that we do in our lives, and we do it all the time, where we could die doing it.
Right.
Or kill somebody else. But putting music on too loudly, that's distracted driving. Why? How are you going to hear that ambulance that's coming through the intersection if you
Right.
have it on, or if you're wearing earphones?
Mm-hmm.
Even talking too loudly, singing with the friends in your car, and snaking your neck around to take a look at what they're doing. Of course, rubbernecking when you're driving and looking at other things happening on the road sideways.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different forms of distracted driving. The best thing to do is to just get from point A to point B as safely as you can,
Mm-hmm.
which means stay off the phone, whether it's handheld or not. Don't engage in any of these distracted driving things. If an emergency pops up and you have to take a call, do it hands-free and get off the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Get to the point of the thing, tell the person you're driving and you want to focus, hang up and get to where you want to go. This way you can live and then do all the fun things that you want to do
Mm-hmm.
once you're out of the car.
Well, that was great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Just gonna